In the frozen mud of the Hurtgen Forest, a 19-year-old from Ohio cracked open a tin the size of his fist and spooned cold meat hash into his mouth in the dark. No fire, no plate, no choice. What he ate that night was designed by food scientists, tested in government labs, and engineered to keep a man alive long enough to fight another day. Some of it tasted like cardboard soaked in salt. Some of it was so calorie-dense it made soldiers gag. And one item on this list, number 7, was so hated by the men who ate it that veterans still talk about it 80 years later with something between a laugh and a shudder. But here is the part nobody tells you. A few of these foods were genuinely brilliant. Scientists developed techniques during World War II that ended up reshaping the American food supply forever. Instant coffee, freeze-dried vegetables, fortified chocolate, powdered everything. The grocery store you walk into today looks the way it does because of what soldiers ate in the dirt between 1941 and 1945. Before we count down, hit subscribe, because what these men ate to survive is one of the most overlooked stories of the entire war. Number 25. Hardtack. Every war for 1,000 years had hardtack in it, and World War II was no exception. These were dense, pale squares of flour and water, baked twice until all moisture was gone. A single cracker could survive months in a pack without spoiling. Soldiers carried them as emergency backup when everything else ran out. The texture was somewhere between a ceramic tile and a very serious suggestion of food. Men soaked them in canteen water, crumbled them into hot coffee, or just bit down and accepted the consequences. Hardtack had been feeding armies since the Civil War. The recipe barely changed. During World War II, crackers evolved slightly into the compressed biscuits packed inside K-Rations, but the principle was identical. Give a soldier something with calories that weighs almost nothing, and that will never, ever go bad. In the Pacific Theater, where supply lines could be cut off for weeks, those crackers were sometimes the only solid food a unit had for days on end. Number 24. Bouillon cubes, a foil-wrapped cube the size of a thumbnail. That was dinner sometimes. American soldiers carried dehydrated beef bouillon as part of their emergency ration kit. Drop it in a canteen cup of boiling water, and you had something that technically qualified as soup. The sodium content was staggering. A single cube had enough salt to make a modern nutritionist go pale. But salt kept men going. Salt replaced what sweat stripped out during 16-hour marches through jungle heat or desert sun. Medics in North Africa used bouillon broth to help treat dehydration. The warmth of a hot cup, even one that tasted mostly of salt and chemicals, had a psychological effect that food scientists had not yet quantified, but commanders understood instinctively. Men who had something warm to drink held together better. It was morale in a cube. Soldiers stirred it into their crackers, their canned hash, their powdered eggs. It made everything slightly more bearable. Number 23. Lemon powder. Packs of powdered lemon drink were tucked into ration kits as a vitamin supplement and a morale item. The powder mixed into water turned it faintly yellow and gave it an aggressively artificial citrus flavor that bore only a distant relationship to actual lemon. But it was sweet. In a diet dominated by salt, grease, and tin-flavored meat, something sweet was extraordinary. Soldiers hoarded the lemon packets. They rationed them out across days, sometimes just licking a finger and dipping it into the powder to get a hit of sweetness without wasting the whole packet. The vitamin C in those packets was not a marketing gimmick. Scurvy, which had plagued armies for centuries, was a genuine concern in isolated Pacific garrisons, where fresh produce was impossible to supply. The lemon powder was the Army's answer. It worked. There were no significant scurvy outbreaks among American troops in World War II, and those bright yellow packets were a quiet reason why. Number 22. Canned pork and beans. The C-Ration canned pork and beans was the entry-level comfort food of the American military. A small tin with a dull green label, a pull-open lid if you were lucky enough to have the opener. Inside, navy beans in tomato sauce with a few small chunks of pork that had been pressure cooked until they surrendered all texture and most of their personality. Eaten cold from the can in a foxhole, somewhere in France or Guadalcanal, it was warm in memory, if not in temperature. Men described it as the one C-ration that actually tasted like something their mothers might have made. The beans were filling, calorie-dense, and required no preparation. An infantryman could eat a can in under 2 minutes with his fingers if he lost his spoon, which happened. In surveys conducted by the Army after the war, pork and beans consistently ranked as one of the least hated ration items. That was the standard. Least hated. Welcome to military dining. Number 21st, chewing gum. Every standard ration kit included sticks of gum. This was not a casual snack inclusion. Military nutritionists included chewing gum for specific psychological and physiological reasons. Chewing stimulates saliva production, which aids digestion of the dry, compressed rations soldiers were eating. It also reduces the perception of hunger during periods when food was unavailable. Wrigley's Spearmint and Double Mint were both pulled from civilian sale at various points during the war because production was redirected entirely to military rations. Soldiers chewed through enormous quantities. Medics noted that men in high-stress situations chewed constantly, jaw muscles working through ambushes and artillery barrages, the rhythmic motion providing something close to calm. When trading and bargaining broke out between American soldiers and locals in liberated towns, a pack of Wrigley's could get you almost anything. Gum became a currency. The company printed millions of sticks a week for the armed forces alone. First pattern break. Here is where World War II changed your morning forever. Before 1941, instant coffee existed, but it was grainy, weak, and nothing most people would choose voluntarily. The military needed something different. Soldiers in the field could not brew coffee, but they needed caffeine. They needed warmth, and they needed something that reminded them they were still human beings, not just rifle-carrying machines. The Army contracted companies to develop a genuinely soluble coffee powder, a granule that would dissolve completely in cold or hot water without stirring. By 1943, millions of tins of instant coffee were being shipped to every theater of the war. The development work that happened in those labs, the spray drying techniques, the solubility improvements, the flavor preservation methods, went directly into the commercial instant coffee industry after the war ended. The cup of Folgers crystals your grandfather made every morning in 1962 existed because his unit ran out of percolators somewhere in Italy in 1944. Number 19. Spam. No list of World War II military food survives without Spam, and its inclusion here is not ironic. It is serious. Hormel shipped over 100 million pounds of Spam to Allied forces during the war, not just Americans. The British Army ate it. Soviet forces received it through Lend-Lease, and Nikita Khrushchev later wrote that without American canned meat, the Red Army might not have had the nutrition to survive Stalingrad. Spam is pork shoulder, ham, salt, water, and sodium nitrite, cooked in the can. It does not need refrigeration. It does not need preparation. It has a shelf life that outlasts most of the men who ate it. Soldiers fried it when they had access to a pan. They ate it cold when they did not. They put it in crackers, boiled it into stew, and mixed it with powdered eggs. They hated it by the second month, and they ate it gratefully by the third, when the alternative was nothing. Spam did not win the war, but it fed the army that did. Number 18. Powdered eggs. Here is where things get grim. The D-ration kit included packets of powdered whole egg, dehydrated into a pale yellow dust that reconstituted into scrambled eggs when mixed with water and heated. The concept was sound. The execution was catastrophic. Soldiers universally despised powdered eggs. The flavor was sulfuric, the texture rubbery, and the color a suspicious yellow that looked nothing like what came out of a real hen. Army field surveys from 1943 showed powdered eggs as the single most disliked item in the entire ration system. Soldiers wrote home, complaining specifically about them. Cartoonists made jokes about them. One sergeant in the Pacific recalled that his men would rather go hungry than eat powdered eggs a fourth consecutive morning. The Army kept issuing them anyway because the nutritional profile was excellent. Each packet delivered complete protein, fat, and multiple vitamins. Your body did not care that your taste buds were protesting. You needed those eggs whether you wanted them or not. Number 17. The D-Ration Emergency Chocolate Bar. Hershey's created this bar on direct contract from the United States Army, and the Army's instructions were specific in a way that tells you everything. They wanted a bar that tasted just a little bad on purpose. Not inedible, just bad enough that soldiers would not eat their emergency ration for pleasure. The D-Ration bar was designed to be eaten only when no other food was available. It was 4 ounces of compressed chocolate, oat flour, powdered skim milk, and cocoa fat, engineered to deliver 600 calories and to withstand temperatures up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit without melting. It tasted, according to most soldiers who ate one, like a slightly chocolate-flavored piece of chalk. Hershey's delivered over 3 billion of them during the war. When everything else was gone, when the supply line was cut and the unit had been in the same position for 4 days, when a man had not eaten in 36 hours, that bad chocolate bar was exactly what kept him standing. Number 16. Canned corned beef hash. Second pattern break. The Army's canned corned beef hash came in a small flat tin and contained diced potato, shredded beef, and enough salt to preserve it through the apocalypse. Cold, it was dense and sticky, the beef clumped with fat and starch. Heated in the can over a small fire, which soldiers were often forbidden to light because the glow was visible to enemy positions at night, it became something that at least resembled a meal. What nobody tells you is that the corned beef hash formula the Army used during World War II was nearly identical to the commercial product that later appeared on American grocery shelves. The technology, the canning process, the preservation method, all of it transferred directly. When soldiers came home from Europe and the Pacific, they were already familiar with the product. The food industry understood this. Canned hash became a post-war bestseller in the American market, partly because it reminded veterans of something familiar, even when that something was cold food in a foxhole. Number 15. The K-Ration Breakfast Unit. The K-Ration was a small rectangular box about the size of a Cracker Jack package, designed to fit in a soldier's shirt pocket. The breakfast unit contained compressed biscuits, a small tin of chopped ham and eggs, a fruit bar, a packet of soluble coffee, 4 cigarettes, and a piece of chewing gum. Nutritionist Ansel Keys designed it in 1941, and the Army issued it as a short-term ration for paratroopers and assault units in the first phase of operations, when a man was moving too fast to stop and cook. It delivered roughly 3,000 calories across all 3 daily units. Real human beings doing combat operations burned between 4,500 and 6,000 calories a day. The K-Ration was always a deficit. Soldiers who lived on it for more than a week began losing weight noticeably. Men who jumped into Normandy on June 6, 1944, carried K-Rations in every available pocket. Some of them did not get a hot meal for 9 days. Number 14. Canned meat and vegetable stew. This was the prestige item of the C-Ration system, the one soldiers would trade other items to acquire. A tin of meat and vegetable stew contained actual, recognizable food, chunks of beef, potato, and carrot in a thick brown sauce that, when heated, smelled almost exactly like something a mother might have made on a Sunday. Almost. The beef was soft from pressure canning, the potatoes slightly gray, the carrots contributing mainly color. But it was stew. In the context of a ration system that included powdered eggs and sulfured fruit bars, stew was luxury. Men in the European theater heated it on the engine blocks of jeeps when they could not light a fire. In the Pacific, where heat was never a problem, they sometimes heated cans in shallow pools of standing water, warmed by the sun. The ritual of heating a can of stew, of smelling something warm and vaguely domestic, was more than nutrition. It was a 5-minute break from being at war. Number 13. Processed cheese. Every C-ration included a small tin of processed American cheese. Not cheddar, not Swiss. It was a dense orange block that felt entirely synthetic, one the American military had been issuing since the 1930s, and the Kraft Company had perfected into a product that would remain edible indefinitely under nearly any conditions. Soldiers ate it on crackers, melted it into ration hash, and used it as currency in trades with local populations who had never encountered anything quite like it. Italian farmers who received it as gifts reportedly had no framework for what it was. The cheese required no refrigeration. It contained a solid block of protein and fat, and it had the textural resilience to survive being sat on, dropped, submerged, and frozen without apparent damage. Food historians have noted that the American military's enormous processed cheese contracts during World War II essentially built the infrastructure of the American processed cheese industry. The sliced American cheese in your refrigerator today descends directly from what soldiers ate in the mud of the Rhineland. Number 12. Fruit bars. Compressed fruit bars appeared in multiple ration kits as a concentrated energy source and vitamin delivery mechanism. Made from dried apricots, prunes, or mixed fruit, compressed under tremendous pressure into a dense block, they were calorie-rich, moderately sweet, and loaded with the B vitamins and natural sugars that a man burning thousands of calories daily desperately needed. Soldiers who had been living on canned meat and crackers for weeks craved them with an intensity that surprised even the nutritionists who designed them. The sweetness hit something deep. Men who ate them in the field reported a mood shift, a brief brightness that went beyond simple blood sugar. Sugar was comfort. Sugar was home. A fruit bar in a foxhole was a man remembering that he had eaten pie once in a kitchen where no one was shooting at him. Number 11. Pemmican. Third pattern break. Before the modern ration system was fully developed, American forces in certain theaters, especially early in the Pacific Campaign and during the Alaska operations, relied on pemmican. This was a food technology with roots in Native American practice that trappers and Arctic explorers had used for centuries. It was rendered beef fat and dried beef mixed together into a dense brick. Nothing else. No salt was added in the military version. No sweetener, just compressed fat and protein with a caloric density of roughly 3,500 calories per pound. A man could carry 3 days of sustenance in his jacket pocket. The military contracted pemmican production early in the war for special operations units and isolated garrisons. What is extraordinary is that pemmican does not spoil. A properly made brick could be kept for years at room temperature. The science behind it was simple. Complete removal of moisture and the antioxidant properties of rendered fat directly influenced the development of freeze-drying technology that the Army invested in during the latter years of the war. The food industry adopted those techniques immediately after 1945. Number 10. Canned bacon. Pre-cooked strips packed in their own grease, requiring only warming to become something that triggered every memory of American breakfast. The smell of bacon frying, even in a tin balanced on 2 rocks over a small flame in France, had an almost ceremonial significance. Men gathered, men talked, men briefly became people who lived in houses again instead of targets in a war. Canned bacon was not just food. It was the Army's calculated investment in the psychological survivability of its own soldiers. Number 9. The 10-in-1 ration was a group ration designed to feed 10 men for 1 day. It came packed in a waterproof box about the size of a small suitcase. It included canned meat, crackers, coffee, sugar, jam, evaporated milk, hard candy, cigarettes, and toilet paper. What made it different from individual rations was that it required actual cooking, actual meal making. the kind of communal eating that turns a group of frightened men into a unit. Army field records showed that units that were issued the 10-in-1 ration reported higher cohesion and lower rates of combat fatigue. Eating together matters. It always has. Number 8. Hard candy, butterscotch, lemon drops, peppermint. Included to stimulate saliva, reduce hunger, and deliver quick sugar to men running on empty. But soldiers used it in ways the nutritionists never anticipated. They gave it to children in liberated towns. They traded it with prisoners. A Jiwahu pressing butterscotch into the hand of a French child in August 1944 was doing something small and enormous at the same time. Hard candy built more goodwill for American forces in occupied Europe than any number of official communications. Number 7. The meat hash unit. The most universally despised item in the entire American military food system. And that is saying something given the competition from powdered eggs. A tin of beef, pork, or chicken compressed into a uniform gray mass that resembled nothing so much as something a dog might reject. Cold, it had the texture of wet clay. Heated, the smell became aggressive. A sergeant in Patton's Third Army wrote that he would rather eat his boot. The Army issued it anyway because it delivered more calories per ounce than almost everything else in the system. Here is the strange postscript. The formulations developed for military meat hash directly influenced the development of commercial pet food after the war. The product that kept soldiers alive ended up in the bowls of their dogs when they got home. Number 6. Sugar tablets. Compressed glucose tablets were included in assault rations as emergency energy. A single tablet could keep a man functional through the critical minutes when exhaustion was slowing his reflexes and his thinking. Airborne troops sometimes spent days behind enemy lines before link-up, and these tablets bridged the gap. Men said they tasted like the 5-and-dime store, like everything they were fighting to go home to. 40 calories and a complicated feeling. Number 5. Canned fruit cocktail. When fruit cocktail appeared in a ration, soldiers treated it like dessert at a fine restaurant. Peaches, pears, grapes, and cherries in heavy syrup. Men drank the syrup straight from the tin before touching the fruit. Army nutritionists had data showing that sweet, familiar food items reduced anxiety markers in soldiers under prolonged stress. In the Pacific, where heat stripped everything from the body around the clock, a tin of fruit cocktail was something close to restorative. They were right to include it. Number 4. Evaporated milk. Evaporated milk was among the most versatile items in the system. Medics used it to settle the gastrointestinal problems caused by months of processed food. Soldiers stirred it into instant coffee and, for 30 seconds, were in a kitchen somewhere in America. Army field psychiatrists documented that simple comfort items, warm drinks, and brief familiarity reduced acute stress reactions in frontline units more reliably than many clinical interventions. The Army noted this, and it influenced ration design for the next 50 years. Number 3. Nescafe Instant Coffee. Issued through Allied supply channels early in the war, it became one of the most powerful symbols of the American military experience. In the freezing winters of Belgium and Germany, a cup was the difference between a man who could function and a man who could not. The caffeine was obvious. The warmth was obvious. What was less obvious was the ritual. Heating water, measuring powder, pouring a cup. A 5-minute act of civilization that said, I am still a person. I am still connected to a world where mornings happen. The post-war American certainty that coffee is not optional but essential was reinforced by millions of men who drank it in the worst possible circumstances and associated it with survival. Number 2. The K-Ration cigarettes. 4. Cigarettes in every kit. Military medical staff understood nicotine as a functional item. It suppressed appetite. It reduced the perception of cold. It sharpened short-term focus. The shared ritual of smoking, the passing of a light, the common pause, created a social bonding moment nothing else replicated as reliably. Men who did not smoke before the war started in the field. Men who started in the field continued at home. The tobacco industry had pushed hard for ration inclusion. They got it, and they harvested that addiction for decades afterward. Number 1. The C-Ration, pound cake. This is not a joke. The single most beloved item in the entire American military ration system was a small, dense, yellow cake packed in a flat tin. Soldiers traded for it and hid it from their unit to eat alone. Army food historians found it mentioned in positive terms more frequently than any other item across all theaters. Not the coffee, not the stew, not the cigarettes. The pound cake. A 19-year-old in a foxhole in the Ardennes ate one on Christmas Day, 1944, and wrote home to say it was the best thing he had eaten all year. He was probably right, not because the cake was extraordinary, but because he ate it alive. 25 foods, millions of men, a war fought on powdered eggs, bad chocolate, and one beloved tin of pound cake. The grocery store you walk into today, the instant coffee, the canned goods, the freeze-dried food on the camping shelf, all of it carries the DNA of what these men ate to survive. Drop in the comments which one you would have traded everything else for. My money is on the pound cake. It always was.